Shallow Mellow Yellow. Greetings to you. Alrighty. What a trippy whippy. After so many hours, I was really thinking that this would be a total of 4 videos, approximately 30 minutes apiece. And it's been so many, and now we are getting to discussing darkness. So, taking a walk to the store here in my store, and I'll share a little bit about my experience with darkness. So, MBA comes, and I'm in a pretty dark place in life. Just got out of the Marine Corps, but head to Spain, new environments, new ways of thinking, new experiences, out of that old bubble of kind of depressiveness and negativity, and letting go of alcohol. End of the year comes, I let go of alcohol, and I head back to San Diego feeling like, okay, this has the potential to be a big year. The first time really that I'm not staying with parents, I don't have a job that I have responsibilities towards, I don't have any family, I'm not in university or master's. I have my own business that I can do as I feel. I have money that I've saved up and a lot of freedom that I'd never experienced to that point, 33, 34 years old. Feeling excited, feeling re-energized. I've had first psychedelic experiences, mind is opening up, seeing new possibilities, that I'm not just doomed to this way as whatever those disempowering stories are. You will always be, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, or you are, this is in your DNA or in your family, or things like that. So feeling really amped, feeling really excited going into 2018. And I read a book named Stealing Fire. And from a Western kind of life hacker, biohacker research sort of perspective, really interesting book about flow states and about altered states and, extreme sport athletes and Navy SEALs and Burning Man and psychedelic journeys and all these different things about how to tap into these states. And that's very much what I'm into at that time. And so in that, the authors share about what are known as float tanks or sensory deprivation tanks. I think they were talking about it in regards to the Navy SEALs using them. And basically what it is a room that's big enough to where you can lay down in it with arms out, all black, soundproof pretty much, and filled with a few inches of salt water so that it can lay in it, be neutrally buoyant, so float without any pressure or stress on any parts of the body. And so whether it's people like the SEALs or whether it's just regular people in a commercial one, stay in them for 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. Use it for meditation, use it for relaxing, use it for brainstorming, use it for whatever. And I thought that was a really cool idea. It sounded really interesting, but at the same time, I was really quite frightened by it. I felt a lot of anxiety about it because up to that point, I didn't have much of a relationship with myself. I hadn't really cultivated getting to know myself. I much more viewed myself, and especially psychology or the psyche or the mind, as this black box that, like I said, is just something that's out of my control. Who knows what's in there, because of all of these conditionings largely of, oh, well, he just snapped, or he just went crazy, or he just lost it, or out of control, or these sorts of stories. And so that I assumed that was something I needed to be concerned about. And I had different experiences, such as every so often, I don't remember for how long, maybe a couple of years or something, in the past, there would be times where, let's say I'm with, whether it was just someone at the grocery store or maybe a friend or family, someone that I cared about, but at some point there would be some little thought in the mind that would come up and say, oh, you should hit them, you should punch them, you should hurt them, or something. And I felt very concerned about this, very bothered by this, because, well, what does that mean? Do I secretly want to hurt people? I don't want to hurt people. Why is this coming up? Why is there something deep inside of me that really wants to do this? And I need to be worried of that. I need to be frightened of that. And so maybe if I'm all alone with myself in the dark, that will come out, and I'll find out that I'm actually, whatever these labels are that society uses of like a sociopath or a psychopath, or some person who's just born broken, basically, right? Some person who's just different from everybody else. Everybody else seems to be really desirous of giving and receiving love and giving and receiving care for others, except every so often there are just these people who are just born different, and maybe I'm one of them. And I didn't understand it at the time. Of course, it came about understanding later. Well, it's not really surprising, as we've discussed, that if I'm just ingesting over and over messages that are saying, what are the majority of the box office showing? It's violence. It's hurting other people in some way or another, whether they say it's good, because it's good versus evil, but it's still the police or the heroes or the whoever harming and killing people, or the books or the shows or, Game of Thrones or whatever. It's just a bunch of messages about harming people, and video games and songs and all of that. So is it really surprising that that stuff bubbles up in the mind every so often? Not really. I didn't really get that. I didn't believe that part of cause and effect. I believed it in some ways, but I didn't believe it like that. And subsequently, in the years since, I don't remember, it's been some years for sure since one of those little thoughts have come up in the mind. But even if they were to come up in the mind now, I wouldn't feel any sort of bother. It's just kind of like something that's funny, because it's still some little seed in the mind that has been planted in the past, and now I know I don't need to take it personally and worry about it. But back then I didn't. And so it felt quite concerning of, I'm 33, 34 years old. I've been flying helicopters in the military for 10 years. I've been in Afghanistan and multiple deployments. I'm jumping out of planes and I'm doing all of this stuff, but I am feeling quite concerned about having 45 minutes in a dark room with my mind, because I don't know what's going to come about, Like, what a trip. That is how disempowered and trained I could be, when it would be so easy to just make movies and books and things with the opposite message about how powerful we are and how much potential we have inside of each other, and just have gurus and teachers that share that kind of thing. Anywho, I was really stoked either way about the whole journey, and so I started going about float tanks. And pretty soon, pretty quickly, like almost immediately, I found, there's not really anything to be worried about. So far, I didn't go crazy or anything. It's all good. So I started going in on it. I got a monthly membership, and I would just go as many times as I could. And I started experiencing some of the things I've been talking about as far as the beginning understandings about having space in the mind and in life, and the bliss of secluding from all the sensory engagement and all the engagement of the day-to-day, being in these places. Now, at that time, I was still very much in the doing, accomplish. I was focusing it more on the personal growth now instead of on the business or whatnot, or on partying. But it was still very much from this kind of Western consumption, personal development sort of thing of the more that I do, the better that's going to be. And so I would try to stack these experiences, whether using different nootropics or substances to try and tweak the brain, tweak the mind. And I would listen to like recorded affirmations or positive things with waterproof earplugs while I'm in the float tanks and whatnot. So I wasn't yet at the place of really recognizing the value and the benefit of just being at peace without doing, but it was starting to get there, and it was resonating. So continued in 2019. 2020, I get to Spain, to India, and I remembered about how I'd been interested of what will happen if I'm in like days of darkness. There's not many resources that I'm familiar with about darkness, many books or many like in-depth sharings. And one that I do know of is written by a man named Mantak Chia. He's a Taoist master. I've really gotten a lot of benefit from some of his books about male sexuality, like about practicing controlling, basically the benefit that can come from while being sexual, not just continually ejaculating and things like that, and how that can actually be very harmful physically and psychologically, and there being ways to be able to be intimate with a partner while not just continually using these resources that are put in, all the energy that is put into creating semen, which subsequently is drawn from other body parts and things. So I'd gotten benefit from his books, and he also writes a book about, it's called Darkness Technology. And I'm only aware of it being a PDF. I don't think it's for sale. I'll put a link down there. And in his understanding currently, among other things, and it's one of the only ones I know of, like I said, there are some from Tibetan Buddhists, because Tibetan Buddhist practices, they have a history of using dark rooms for certain things. And then others like the ancient Egyptians and even Christians in the old days using catacombs, Greeks and things. There are some historical clues of this being used in many different cultures, but not really many currently. In his book, Mantak Chia describes what is currently believed by some that certain foods like milk, spirulina, others, they have one part of them is known as tryptophan, and it's thought that tryptophan is taken by the body and is one of the ingredients to create serotonin, which, as many of us know, is among other things, it's like the happiness chemical. And so it's thought that serotonin is released during the day and melatonin is released at night. Melatonin, many of us are familiar with, it's just over the counter, it's just given to help people go to sleep. But it being a hormone, as I was saying previously, it's a very powerful thing. It impacts many, many things beyond just one of the roles of being one of the things that the body looks to to determine if it is time to go to sleep. And actually, I've seen many studies or meta studies about melatonin, and it seems that really it doesn't actually, taking it exogenously, taking it as a supplement, doesn't really do that much besides cause the mind, give the placebo effect of think that it's doing something. Doesn't really do that much for sleep. It impacts the body a lot. And so actually it's like using a sledgehammer to open a squeaky door or something. It impacts so many different things. And for children, if I'm remembering correctly, among other things, they found it to bring about early puberty, which, if we think about it, to cause the body to start growing and changing physically early, that means that whatever I'm doing or taking is pretty powerful. If all of a sudden my bones start getting bigger and my voice starts changing and hair starts growing, that's a pretty powerful effect. And it's not really acknowledged. It's just like, here, take this over-the-counter thing. But for darkness, it's thought that staying in darkness for multiple days, serotonin is not released as much and more melatonin is released. And then at some point after some days, that is changed into this other substance produced by the pineal gland known as pinolene, P-I-N-O-L-E-N-E, I believe, which is also very powerful and has many impacts. And then after some days, that is thought to turn into 5-methoxydimethyltryptamine, or 5-MeO-DMT. And after some days, that is thought to turn into dimethyltryptamine, or DMT. And those last two, 5-MeO and DMT, are also produced in nature in different ways. DMT is what one experiences, one of the things that one experiences when they're using ayahuasca, which is a very powerful psychedelic from the Amazon. And 5-MeO DMT comes sometimes in seeds, certain seeds in nature, and also from the secretions of the Sonoran desert toad, I believe. It's the Sonoran desert. And that has been used, both of these have been used for thousands of years. It's thought very powerful psychedelic experiences. So when I read that, I was really excited, because at that time I was much more into psychedelics, and I had experienced those initial benefits from psychedelics. And so I was thinking, wow, well, if in darkness for days these are being produced, then maybe that's just like having a 24-hour-a-day, multi-day psychedelic journey, and that just must be good. So let's do that. When I was in India, I also heard Aubrey Marcus's podcast where he talks about his dark retreat. I believe he did a 6 or a 7-day dark retreat, and he was very adamant as well about the visuals being so big and stronger than any psychedelic journey that he's had, which is he's had a lot. And so I was further excited. So initially, I was just where I was staying in a room, covered the windows with some blankets, and wore an eye mask because that didn't make it totally dark. And I did 5 days, and then later I did 7 days. I believe both of those I dry fasted, no food or water. And I'll share more about combining things like that and stacking, which is something that, again, I had a lot of history with, and sometimes it has benefit, and sometimes it's a distraction, and sometimes it's actually dangerous in my experience. So those first, the 5 and the 7 days, I used the phone a little bit, if I remember correctly. I had like a breathwork session, Zoom session and stuff, but for the most part I was just alone. And that was really the first time that I had ever been silent, in silence, and in separation intentionally for multiple days. And looking back on it, it's like, props to you, younger Samuel, because that's cool to step out like that with no experience, and just to do that on my own, and to get that experience of okay, this is what happens when I'm not engaging with the phone or with friends or with books, because books historically for so long have been one of the largest escapes of my life. And they look a lot more, reading looks a lot more positive than like getting drunk on the weekends or getting on Tinder or something. But at some point, reading, it's an escape. Like, let me learn more information instead of put to use the information that I've actually already learned, put it into practice and make it personal and start actually changing my life. I would just be looking for the thing to change me by reading, or else just to escape into the world. Nothing against reading, I still use it, but it's very little now compared to what it used to be. So those first 5 and 7 days were really insightful. I got benefit out of them for sure. I decided after a month or two, let's do it for real. Let me fully cover the windows, make it totally black. I used paper and tape, and I did that for 7 days. And that was very insightful to see what the mind is doing. And that one, I remember, one big insight was how much I was thinking about money. And at that time, that's midway through 2020. So I've been on this intentional journey now for several years. And it was back in even before the MBA, so probably a handful of years prior, I had been aware of, I had an unbalanced focus on money. Because when I was younger, when I was a child, unconsciously, I had kind of conflated having money, because I had grown up with not very much money, and we were able to do other things, just the focus or priority on money wasn't there in my family compared to friends or others. And so I had drawn unconsciously and incorrectly that if there's not money in the household, then that can lead to stress in the marriage and in raising the children. And the different challenges that I had felt as a child, I kind of conflated them with not having money, and that was incorrect. But that was a driver for me for decades, from being a young child until really being in my early 30s. So I had been aware of that a little bit, and then in 2018, 2019, I had more powerful experiences like with Tony Robbins and things, where I saw how this focus on money unconsciously had been actually bringing about all kinds of self-sabotage, because I was interested in being, at that time, I was interested in being a good father and a good husband, quote unquote, but I was dedicating so much time to making money and entrepreneurship that I wasn't giving time to relationships, and I wasn't giving time or effort to myself, and so I was subsequently unbalanced, so I was subsequently unhappy, so I was subsequently using escape mechanisms like alcohol and casual sex, casual relationships, to try and cope with those feelings of unhappiness, because I didn't have a relationship with myself to know where they were coming from. And so it was feeding on itself, and not actually, it was bringing me the opposite results that I was looking for. So beginning in 2018, and more so in 2019, and very much more so when I went to India, I was intentionally letting go of money and the focus on money. And those were the first years of my life where I ever used more money in a month, even, let alone a year, than came in, because I was not working very much, and then I was not working at all. And I was using thousands and tens of thousands of dollars to attend different experiences or conferences or courses or trainings or psychedelic retreats and all kinds of things. So I was intentionally stepping into being with that discomfort of not having money. And yet in this 7-day dark room, 2.5 years in, I was like, wow, the mind is just thinking about money all the time. All of these fear stories of what's going to happen if we run out of money, and all of these little habits that I can remember going back to at least high school, but maybe even before, of being at my childhood homes in the bunk bed at night and planning, well, if I take this money that I'm making from mowing lawns and selling things, and I invest it in this, and then with compound interest over this amount of time, then I'll have this, and then the bigger plan is this, and all of these little plans back then, which at that time I thought were positive. And for many years I thought that was positive, because it's like, oh, I'm being proactive and intentional, and I am planning for the future, whereas other people that I know, they're not. And so I have more money now, and financial freedom and all of that. So I had thought that that was positive, but really what it was is that I was developing or just further strengthening the habit of an unskillful mind, which was to focus on things continually at times when it wasn't really appropriate. Nothing against, let's all be intentional about our finances and not just be unconscious, so that we can be in places that have less stress because we don't have the financial concerns, and we can support and assist others because we have those extra finances. Let's do that. But in bed at night is probably not the appropriate time to be thinking about that, and all the time is probably not the appropriate time, and feeling anxiety about finances is probably not appropriate. But I was doing that for decades, and so here I am at 30, however old I was then, 5 or 6 in India, and I'm in the dark room and just thinking about these things, either like little plans of how I can make more, or plans about what I'll do with it, or who I'll help, or how I'll do different things, or fears about what will happen, of like, what if nothing comes in? And for days and days, and at that point, I didn't have the relationship with myself or the understanding, okay, these are just seeds. They've been planted, these thoughts. They're just seeds. They were planted in the past, and now the conditions are right and they're coming up. And so I don't need to take them personally. I don't even need to engage in them. I didn't know that. I thought I didn't have any tool, and they just kept coming up. And at some point, and I've experienced this now many times, not just with money, but all different sorts of thoughts. If I don't have a tool to let them go, and I don't have the understanding of that it's not personal, it's not a big deal, and that yes, by letting them go over and over, they will stop coming up, but also that I can still be, even if these thoughts are coming up around here, I can still be at peace. They don't need to impact me. Without knowing that, it gets very exhausting, as others may know. If you've ever been lying in bed trying to fall asleep, but thoughts keep coming, and it feels psychologically and physically exhausting, because the brain is using all of this energy to focus on things that are totally out of my control. Nothing can come from them. And so that first retreat, I was like, holy geez, goodness gracious. So that was insightful, and I was interested in doing it in a way where I was supported, where it was at a retreat center that did this more professionally, so that I could really learn from the way that they did it, and also not need to take care of different logistics and things myself. I wasn't finding anything about dark rooms in India, and I was surprised, because they have so many of these ancient esoteric practices of everything, and I knew a bit that Tibetan Buddhism had dark rooms, but I wasn't finding anything in India. And so initially, for a few months in spring, I was looking for them pretty actively, and then I didn't find anything, so I just let it go. Okay, we'll see, if it's appropriate, it will come up. And that's what it did. A few months later, a friend of mine connected me with a friend of his who had been down in Ashwini Dhamma, which is where I have done the several multi-month dark rooms. And so pretty quickly, I went from, 45 minutes or 2 hours in float tanks in 2018 and 2019, and being afraid of that initially, to putting on my own 5 and 7 days in the spring of 2020. And at that point, I had also been reaching out to different dark rooms around the world, speaking with different professionals or facilitators. There's not that many. I found about 12 or so, I believe. And one of them had suggested, yeah, I think 21 days would be good for you. And I was like, whoa, I'm okay. I've done 5 or 7 days. Okay, but 21? That seems a little bit out of my abilities. Like that seemed, again, I was in this place still of, I had much more of a connection and relationship with myself, in part due to, among many things, because I was intentionally rebuilding that relationship with myself. And one of the tools that I used was The Artist's Way, this book that I've shared different videos about. That is a really great tool that really assisted me earlier in this journey, in part due to journaling and just gaining a connection with the self through questions and journaling. And I would also do what I called walk and talks, where I would go walking in the forest for even hours. Just walking, not like in an intense way where I need to give focus to the climb or something like that, but just walking a path where the mind can kind of disconnect from what it's doing because it's just moving. And then I would speak out loud about whatever I had coming up. For example, when I was preparing for those initial dark rooms for a couple weeks beforehand, I would just have like a general intention of, okay, I know I'm going to be in this retreat. My intention is to be in it for 5 days without eating or drinking, and so there's going to be the temptations of food. So how can I kind of prepare the physical space? I'll take whatever food I have, I'll put it away, and I'll also make this, what sort of commitment will I make? Well, I'll say these specific words or write it down. Okay, well, what sort of temptations may arise? Well, the temptations to use the phone because we say, oh, well, I need to check in with family. Okay, well, then I'll prepare beforehand. I'll let them know. So I would do that sort of thing for both the logical logistics like that, like I was just mentioning, but also for the more psychological things, and just do it in a fluid way. And I started gaining a nicer and nicer relationship with intuition, with the mind, with the deeper mind or whatever. So I was increasing that, but still the idea of having several weeks in darkness without any interactions with others, basically, that was pretty frightening. But I connected with Ashwini Dhamma, decided to go down there, and then I learned about Kaya Kalpa, which was the term for that specific Ayurvedic practice, as I've mentioned. And as I learned about that and learned about Kaya Kalpa process a little bit and about how the rasayanas are specific amounts of time, then I said, okay, this seems like a pretty special opportunity. I can do the dark room and I can do the meditation or just being in the darkness, because I thought magical things would happen in the darkness also, and I can also do this Kaya Kalpa. That's pretty special. And he said, well, the Rasayana is this many, it's several months, but you could at least do half of it. And that's like, a month and some days. And I was like, okay, all right, this is a special thing. And so, yes, I'm going to do it. And then in those weeks prior, I was doing Panchakarma to purify the body. And so I was also preparing the mind more and more for it. And then as the date was coming, I said, you know what, I'm going to do the full thing. I'm going to do several months, because this just seems like a really special opportunity. And I felt very good about it. I'd really been preparing myself. And so that's what I did. And so I went from 7 days on my own to doing several months. And for what I had, as far as basically the practice, I'll share more about that, was just something that I'd cobbled together from Joe Dispenza, Tony Robbins, neurolinguistic programming, The Artist's Way, my own ideas, psychedelic journeys, just something I'd cobbled together to be able to be in a dark room basically without almost any interaction. Every so often the doctor or someone would come and say, hi, how's it going? And I would say, going well, how are you? That was about it. I'm very impressed and very appreciative for earlier self to have gone through that. It was definitely a very positive experience. All dark rooms have been positive for me. And that was, I think, it's really hard to compare different experiences because everything is building upon the last, of course. But definitely a very impactful, if not the most impactful individual experience of my life up to that point. Though again, how can you really compare? I mean, so I had that, very positive. And then I had the next 4 months after that in India, which is a very intuitional space. It's very fluid. It's very just flow, because who knows what's going to happen. You're going down the road and, you meet some very interesting person, or the bus stops for an hour because there's road work going on, or who knows what's going on. The monsoon comes through, or who knows what. It's just a very intuitional and fluid space. And that really went well with lessons that I had gained in the darkroom. And so I had really incredible next 4 months with that. Then I felt very positive, and I had used a lot of the time in the darkroom to focus on relationships with family. And so I went home to the U.S., or went to parents' home in the U.S. to have time with them. And as often happens when we go deep in personal growth or just connecting more with ourselves and shining light on these areas that we've ignored or avoided or suppressed or repressed, and different things come out. And so that's what happened. So I decided to go initially I was intending to have a month-long dark retreat in a more commercial type place in Mexico. I had some complications, and so wound up being a little over 3 weeks. And then that one I focused solely on Goenka Vipassana, although at the same time I did about 2 weeks of fasting consecutive, and 8 of those days were dry fasting. And so that kind of distracts from the meditation, because especially dry fasting, the body and the mind can be physically uncomfortable and sometimes agitated. So I've never done an extended multiple weeks with Goenka. And then like last year, my partner, she was really interested in doing darkness, and really wonderful to be in relationship with people who share similar values and interests and support each other and whatnot. I've been very blessed to have several partners like that. Really grateful for being in similar places when we're on the journey and whatnot. So she and we had a 3.5 day dark room, and we had a psychedelic journey during that as well, and dry fasted during that. But just really nice, the darkroom just being so soft and gentle, and no pressure about time and no to-do lists. And so just to be together in that environment, so beautiful, so intimate, and sometimes together, sometimes talking, sometimes not talking, sometimes separate. Really nice. I also did a couple days, I think it's in Darkness Technology or somewhere else, it talks about, it's thought that darkness increases stem cell production. And I was going to have some stem cell therapy done from a really awesome clinic in Utah who can apply as a veteran or as someone with low income. And they accept, 1 or 2, they call it their tithing basically. This is a beautiful example in the US of what is possible. They make money on their stem cells, and they are at the top of the game. Who's that fellow that's really big into fasting, and he's like a serious life hacker guy? That's how far out of the world I am now that I don't remember his name. He does the bulletproof coffee. That fellow,
he goes to this clinic for his stem cells, and he's like biohacker.com, you know. He goes to this clinic, so it's they are on top of their business, but they also offer thousands, tens of thousands of dollars worth of help to people like me or others who have had different physical issues as a veteran or as low income. And I'm really appreciative to them. Their name is Docere Clinics, D-O-C-E-R-E, Dr. Adelson, and I'll put their info down. But yeah, much love and appreciation to them for the assistance that they gave me, but also just for doing it like that and leading by example. And so I did, when I went out there, I got a hotel room or a hostel room there that was just a room with no windows, and I just stayed in it for 2 days at that time. So I've done little small ones like that, and then this time around, this year I had the 5 twin retreats back to back. Was really appreciating the practice, and I was also experiencing different, as I shared in the beginning, like different personal desires of moving forward in my evolution, and I recognized that the darkroom has been so beneficial because it can just focus on the practice and focus on what's going in here and release these things. And so I thought, okay, I'll go and do another month and a bit in Ashwini Dhamma. And as soon as I got on the train to head down there, I was like, no, I'm gonna do several months. And so that's what I did, and really grateful, really fantastic. So that has been my journey up to this point, if I remember all of the different ones. Some small ones, some ones that I put on myself, some ones that I did in different places. And then I will share more about some of the different experiences that come with darkroom. Peace out. Namaste.